So this video is by Invicta, and he kind of goes over a whole bunch of stuff about what's changing in Medieval 3. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to listen to it, and we're going to see what changes he comes up with.
Huge news for Total War Medieval 3 that's going to change the way you look at the Total War franchise for the better. I just got done watching the developer live stream, which showcased how the game is going to play out, and it looks fantastic. I cannot stress
I haven't watched the developer live stream yet, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to watch his video about what the changes are.
this enough. So just a preview of what we're going to be getting into here. They're revamping the campaign maps. It's going to look like Attila, but much more detailed and finessed in terms of the scope and scale of the minutia there. And then in terms of the mechanics, they go over that we're doing away with the old province system, which locked you into preset building slots and building chains. Now it's a more open flowing region development system where you have a capital, but then you have all these different organic buildings that you can hand place around, place a castle, place a port where you want it, upgrade that, add perks to it. And then they went over a new revamped system of population, which has estates.
Hold on, so we're getting rid of building slots. So if we wanted to, are we able to kind of say put like an encampment next to a border that's an enemy? This is huge. Being able to place the buildings where we want them, this is huge. This is a first for Total War. I agree with Invicta's title that this changes everything. This is going to be a whole brand new way to play. I'm excited.
For your nobility, your urban class, your rural class. They went over wealth and taxation management, which gets away from pure sliders and gets into much more fluid simulations that interact with everything. It is awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So now let's go into the details of my note taking. So here's my board, again, capturing the notes and the screenshots from this developer interview and recapping it. We're going to be going through the intro, campaign map, region system, construction, and population and wealth.
Okay, the intro is kind of whatever. He already mentioned that the campaign map is going to be more like Attila. I never really played Attila much, but I remember that map. That map was phenomenal. So it looks like the region system is just kind of replacing the province system. Construction and population and wealth. I can't even begin to give my take on those yet.
So starting with the intro here, basically what they're saying is they're reinforcing the idea that they are in early pre-production, the earliest that they've ever shown a Total War game, so that is great. They're trying to do this transparency with the community. They were very open in the live stream.
Yeah, they took I can't remember that other company's name. They made Crusader Kings and that ancient game. I can't remember the company's name, but they did the same thing. They showed it off a lot earlier. They let the community kind of decide where it went. And I think it's a great idea, considering the last couple of Total Wars absolutely flopped, except Warhammer 3. They kind of brought back, but I think this is a great thing.
Saying, do you like this format? Do you not like it? They had a live chat. They were pulling questions from it. They're going to take those, go to the forum, try and answer them live. Very candid, very open style of discussion, which I appreciate. Next, they say is that what we're going to be doing today is just showing, not playing, very early stage. Take this all with a grain of salt. But they did say that one of the key things is if you were to parallel this with the development of other Total War games like Three Kingdoms, they said at this stage of pre-production, if you were to mirror it with Three Kingdoms, they're actually doing a lot more now, and that is thanks to Warcore, the fact that they can more dynamically update the campaign map, iterate on things. It's just empowered them already to make a better game and have a better design workflow. So that is good to hear that the foundations being reworked for Total War is allowing them to work much more efficiently. So that's basically it. Last little caveat that they said is that obviously there's two games in development here, 40K and Medieval 3, and they said that yes, these both are going to be using the new Warcore engine, and that yes, maybe if you see something being done in Medieval 3 and 40K, it means that they're both tied to Warcore and enabled, so you can do these types of things. But they warned us, just because you see something in one game does not mean it'll be there one-to-one in the other game. What comes to mind to me is customization of units that's going to be big in 40K, where you can do an army painter, my assumption is, well, if you can do an army painter in Warhammer, you can probably do it in Medieval 3. So
No, no. I do not believe there's going to be the army painter there, just for the simple fact of fantasy versus historical. So, historical, you kind of had it already set. Like, it's not so black and white that we see today, as where it's like the Romans are red. You know, they weren't always necessarily red. It was more like the officers wore red, and the soldiers more or less wore white. But it's kind of where we already have it set to the point where there's certain things, like take England versus France. You always kind of think of France as more like on the blue and England more on the red. I think it's going to kind of stay like that, whereas 40K is a fantasy title. So you could kind of change up how your units look. Plus, you're like fighting orcs in 40K. You're not fighting other humans. While fighting orcs, you already have that distinction. So you could run in with your units being black, and you're going to be able to tell this is human, this is orc. Whereas Medieval 3, it's humans fighting humans. So you're going to kind of have that color distinction. Or if you both are running around with red armies, how are you going to figure out what the distinction is besides, the obvious, the flags, stuff like that? So I don't think maybe like customizing certain units to a point, like the King's Guard, stuff like that, maybe. But I don't think it's going to be as in depth as it will be with 40K.
they're warning us against drawing those conclusions, but it probably means, well, if the option is there, they can probably tap into it in some way. And I assume that war bands in Medieval 3 are going to be much more dynamic, maybe mixed weaponry in the same way that we're seeing that in 40K. So just a little caveat there to put at the top of the hour. All right, now let's start to get into the meat of it. So they get into the campaign map. So they started off showing this concept art, which we've seen before, which is Iberia. They said, well, why are you focused on Iberia? Their answer is that Iberia is a microcosm of the medieval world. A lot of things going on, a rich history here, different cultures kind of fighting over the grounds. And they said visually, it's...
Oh, yeah. Iberia was such a contested realm. If you look back all the way to ancient times, even before the Romans came, you had the Carthaginians taking over southern Iberia. You had the Lusitanians in the northwest. You had the Gauls in the northeast. Like, this is ancient, not medieval, ancient. You had all these different cultures and people clashing to try to get there and take over the land of Iberia. And now that we're going into medieval times, you still kind of have Roman culture that's still kind of present, or Latin culture, I should say. Plus, you have, their own culture kind of coming up. You have a bunch of different kingdoms that are in there fighting. Eventually, one of them creates, the Kingdom of Spain by taking over the other territories. So, Iberia has a very, very rich history. All the way from ancient times where Greece, then Latin Rome, up to, Carthage and Gaul and Lusitanian, up to creating the Kingdom of Spain. Iberia is a very, very contested area up until the Kingdom of Spain was created.
It's just very rich. It gets you away from the color palette and the visual style of Northern Europe that typically dominates the view of the medieval world. So they said this was a great kind of showcase and playground for where they're doing their early development because it has all of this richness.
I forgot ad blockers. For YouTube, this will all be cut out.
Then finally, they did open up the game to show us what Medieval 3 looks like. And I put quotes around this because obviously they say everything you see here is placeholder, the UI, the map, the graphic style, the art, All of this is placeholder, and none of it is going to be in the final game. It's just for them to play with ideas, and the reason they have a color palette is just at least to get our brains to take it over, for the developers to get a sense of things. But they
So I'm kind of hoping with the War Core engine, it actually gets a little bit more detailed. So far, I like the detail in it. What I'm not a fan of is like all this stuff right here. You know, is that supposed to be like a snowy mountaintop? Because if it is, why isn't it over here? Why isn't it over here? You know? So I'm wondering if it's just this, like this stuff over here, they didn't develop yet. That's what I'm hoping. And then kind of like Italy's a bit developed, you know, Sicily, Sardinia, and Iberia are more developed, and that's why they're showing it off right now.
call this very much, their gray block style. So take this with a huge grain of salt. Anyways, they looked at the campaign map. It looks fantastic from what I.
So these must be the different regions that they're talking about. So you have like a region here that you cannot put a port in because obviously you're not connected to anything. But like along the coast here, you could definitely build a port. And these regions here, I'm going to guess probably like farmland because it does look like you got like rivers and stuff going through here. You got one massive river coming through here that looks like it goes to the top of the mountain. So I'm hoping like you could do farmland. You could kind of have like this center region here where you can build up like soldiers. Like you could kind of pick what you want for your regions. So, like this region here, if you want to focus on just gaining wealth and then create like massive farms down here that's responsible for feeding this region and this region, that would be an awesome play style. We are going to have to see if they kind of go into it a little bit more because I know they have a construction slot they're talking about. So these are things just to kind of keep in mind for when we get into the next couple areas where they go into the development progress.
Can see so far, but again, you can't take much from the visuals. So what can you take away from this? Well, they had a couple notes. The first is that it's going to have a Total War Attila-sized landmass. So I put a map here when they zoomed out.
Oh, I was just about to look that up.
The map here, and then here's Attila. So obviously,
so it looks like we're going to kind of be able to take over this area here in Africa. So whereas in like the Rome games, you were able to take over down here too. It looks like they cut that out of Africa. You got Iberia. I wonder if they're gonna have Portugal in here or no. But Spain, France, England, Scotland, Ireland, Asia Minor, which basically over here turns into Turkey. You know, you got Egypt down here with the Nile River. I kind of hope they like open up some of these other areas, maybe in DLCs. That would be nice, you know, give us like the early Russian kingdom to fight. And down here, I mean, I don't really know what they could do down here for medieval because I know like at the bottom here is just all kind of desert. That'll be kind of hard, but hopefully they open up some of these areas more as DLCs progress.
they didn't zoom out all the way on the left. If they're saying Attila, that means we're going to be going all the way to the borders of India. So grand scale there. But then the other thing that they said is although the land masses may be roughly equivalent from game to game, they are saying that with this Medieval 3 game, and especially the way Warcore works, that they're going to have much finer detail when it comes to the territories. So I want to show you this as an example. So like I said, we've been looking at Iberia, and let's go ahead and crop this real quick so we can put it side by side. There you go. So that's north east Iberia. And what I've done is on the right is going to be the Medieval 3 version of Iberia. So one of the main things they said, like I said, is to try and get more detail per region. It may be the same landmass, but now they're increasing the resolution. So take a look at these two maps here. And you can see one thing jumps out much more. In Attila and Rome 2, cities were much more stylistic. So zooming in on this, you can see that Tarraco basically takes, it's stylistic. It takes up a huge amount of territory, and that means that it's basically just a couple inches away from its adjoining settlement. Versus
Yeah, in the older ones, you kind of, I mean, not so much in Three Kingdoms, but as your cities grew in the older ones, they kind of like grew on the map. Um, a little bit, not very like, expandable. They were just kind of there, but it's more like you upgrade them and you get more building slots and stuff like that. You couldn't really change anything. You had certain things you could do in certain areas of it. So I'm hoping with this new one, we could kind of pick where we want to put our capital. So if we want to put our capital like right here at the bend of these two rivers, I'm hoping we can do that. Unless it's going to be where the capital of that province is already set and we just pick our other buildings around it.
when you look in this early stage map, you can see the cities are far smaller in scale. Again, you could say this is just early stage, but it does speak to something in the development of the game that they did explicitly state.
Okay, so he kind of pointed here. So I'm guessing that's one of the cities. So it looks like it actually, he answered my question already. It looks like the cities might actually be set. So hopefully we get some kind of form of dynamic growth then. As our cities expand and we upgrade them, it shows the cities on the actual map getting bigger.
Which is they want you to have this better sense of scale and scope between the cities. More vastness is a word that they use several times to show that the real scale of the environment. So that's awesome. It means that we may be getting the same landmass as Attila, but when you zoom in on any particular region, it's much grander, it's much more rich. There's a lot more going on in just Iberia itself. So that is awesome. I mean, I've always wanted this. It gets away from the gamified stylized version of it, and now it means that you have much more a better sense of your realm. So when armies move around, the exact minutia of your positioning presumably could work. The placement of your settlements could work. Versus here, you don't really get a sense of the terrain because it's more blocky. The pixel size is so large. Versus here, much smaller pixel size, much more minutia. So that gets
Yeah, it gives you, I could see it being a lot harder to place exactly where you want depending on how far you could zoom in. But it definitely will make the armies stand out more. It'll make invading armies stand out more. And you'll be able to see much, much more of exactly what's going on. Now, if they make it too small, it'll be harder to click on your exact settlement that you want. I could see that being a problem too. So they got to kind of find that balance where the settlements are small enough where they don't take over like the blockiness of the picture on the right of this one here, but they're also big enough that it just, one click and you're on the settlement.
behind the intent of the campaign map. Now we get into the really juicy stuff where the live chat was going wild as they started to introduce this. So, region system. All right, so they zoomed in and showed what is an indicative region. So here you can see.
Okay, so it looks like the white border is the one you own. Red, obviously, probably enemy. Red's always been enemy in Total War. Yellow could mean maybe like, ally or something, and purple, or like the yellow and the purple could just be different kingdoms as well. But so far it looks like you cannot place your settlement where you want to. I could be wrong. Like I said, I didn't watch the developer live stream, so I'm not totally sure about that. But so far, it looks like you probably cannot place your settlement where you want to, but it looks like you'll be able to place different buildings where you want to. Because, like, there's one down here, one over here. I don't see anything else.
Borders, very much placeholders, so don't understand this. But this is the key thing. So when you look
Oh,
at a
the borders
region,
are
which is the area
placeholders.
bounded by this border, they said that they're essentially doing away with the old province system. For those unfamiliar, the old province system was basically you would click on this. It's part of a region might be part of a larger province. There's a provincial capital, but each of these regions has a preset number of building slots. You might have 6, or a larger region might have 8 or whatever. And then, so you're limited in terms of buildings, what you can build. And then for each of those buildings, each building progresses up a chain and
Yep.
it gets better and better. But at a certain point, you get to forks, and it's basically limited choice. They said there's pros and cons of this old system. The pro was that it gave you a lot better control over regions, much more
Yep.
distinct character. The con was it was very limiting for the players. So they said they're doing away with this old province system and they're moving more towards a region system. And the way this region system works is I have a quote here. They said a single region with an administrative capital and then rural developments within the borders of the region. Lots more stuff going on in that region compared to previous Total War games. So
All right,
let's
let's
show you
see.
what that looked like. So at a certain point in the stream, they flicked on the UI.
All right, so just at a quick glance, it looks like Burgos is our capital. We have the Pennifield Castle and the Gormaz Castle. So we could at least place castles. Castles are probably like our watchtowers, encampments, stuff like that from previous games. You could probably house armies. You could do it up against a border with an enemy territory. So if they invade, they gotta take that castle. We got farmlands, lumber camps, mines, quarries, castle, city. Maybe we are going to be able to place our city where we want to. That could lead to so many possibilities. So if we invade an enemy province and we take it over, do we destroy their city and then we're able to place our city where we want it? And it looks like we can only place 2 castles. And then over here we have, marine. So probably ports, shipbuilders, stuff like that. And I'm not sure what this one is.
Again, all placeholder, but it gives you a sense of what's going on. So I'll explain this paraphrasing what they said. So you have your administrative capital, which is Burgos, but then you start to see these other areas that pop up, different castles. And each of these castles corresponds to the castle down here. And this is where I was like, well, where's the
Makes
mine? Where's the
sense.
lumber camp? Where's the farmland? And this is where I grabbed some screenshots. They eventually zoomed in on the campaign map, so you can see this tiny little thing here. That's actually a lumber camp that's modeled. And so when you choose to develop a lumber
Oh,
camp, it'll actually show up on your map organically.
nice.
Same thing goes. I had another screenshot where there was a quarry that popped up or a town that popped up. So again, this gets to the greater
Ooh.
pixel size, or the smaller, more finite pixel size, or minutia of the pixel size is increased. Resolution's increased. Sorry. Yeah, it allows them to do stuff like this, where you can have all these sorts of little developments. So what are developments? So they said it's
So it kind of seems like lumberyard, fishing village, stuff like that. Just kind of place it and forget it. It kind of does its own thing. The mine, the vineyards. So it looks like there's only going to be certain things that we're going to have to pay attention to in a region. Castles, towns, our provincial capital or region capital, whatever they call it now. Huh.
Similar to Empire, where these represent important areas that bring you benefits or resources or generate things. So they give examples: fishing village, town, university, mine, vineyards, etc. And
So
right now they're playing
food,
with the mix of
wealth.
what these could be available to you. So they could be generic like farmland, they could be more rare like a vineyard, which is specific to a climate zone, or they could be unique. So I'm just thinking maybe Notre Dame or other very specific, unique, iconic things might just appear once or twice. Things like that. So they're playing with the different versions. Then when it comes to how these look and play, so any one of these kind of regional developments, let's take a lumber mill, for instance, it can organically grow over time. So they're playing with the idea of, as your
Okay.
general region has more pops or more wealth, these specific areas will organically grow and develop and kind of rank up in level. Outside of the player doing it, it just organically happens. But obviously the player does.
So it's a mix. What they're trying to do is mix it. So if you want, you could probably click on, take the lumber yard for example. You could click on it if you want to upgrade that for more lumber. You could do that on yourself, or if you don't necessarily need the lumber over time, it'll just level up and get bigger on its own. I like that system.
Does also have the ability to invest. So they're playing with that. The other thing that they said is, well, how many of these can you have? So they're breaking away from the preset slots and allowing the player much more versatility. So they said that in the region that we were looking at, it's probably a max of around 30 per region. They may vary this by region. It could be higher, it could be lower. They're trying to play with where it is. But already 30 is much more than we've seen in a previous Total War game.
So my question is, does that 30 include the castles? Or is it 30 between like fishing villages, towns, university mines, vineyards, farms, lumber yards? And then is it just two castles? Or could you, for example, have 20 of your items like the fishing village towns and have 10 castles just on your borders surrounding everything? That's something that I would like an answer to.
Game. And what this means, the fact that these can be placed up to 30 per region, maybe even more, the fact that they can grow dynamically based on region wealth or how your campaign is playing out, it means that eventually the way that your world develops and grows will
Oh, it's
change
going
from
to look
campaign to
sick.
campaign. Let's say that Iberia, for instance, in one campaign is well managed. You'll see a lot of urban sprawl, a lot of level up developments, trade routes that get evolved, and all that stuff. It could be very rich. Versus in another campaign, if an army came through and marauded, those scars will stunt the growth of the city such that check back in 10 turns later. And these two are very different. And you imagine projecting that out to the end of your campaign, Iberia looks very different. So I love that from a replayability perspective. Then they started to get into more interesting stuff. And this is where like the crowd went wild.
Going off of what he said about like a marauding army coming through, you could probably go through and redo Iberia if you wanted to. Like reset up your lumber yard, stuff like that, and have it kind of, keep growing organically and not necessarily look destroyed throughout the whole playthrough.
I went wild when they mentioned this. So these developments can be hand placed. This is really, really cool. It wasn't clear if it was all developments, but at least some of them. So they showed, for instance, there are some buttons down here. And I zoomed this up and you can see what the buttons look like. Again, placeholder, but they showed in the playthrough that you could click on a castle. They then selected a region near a river and the castle appeared. They then did the same thing for a port. Clicked here, a port appeared. A port was later built down the shoreline. So that is really cool. A couple of nuances to this. They said that in this demo that they were showing, it was, click and it gets built instantaneously. They're saying that they're looking to make it more organic in the future, where
Oh yeah, they're gonna make it organic, definitely. It's not gonna be an instant build. It's gonna be like other Total War games where you click on it and like your base version may take a turn, but upgrading it, it may take 3 turns, then 5 turns, then 7. I'm just throwing numbers out there. Um, but it's definitely gonna be more of an organic build up. It's not gonna be instantaneous like it is for this demo. That's a no brainer.
where if you want to build a castle, it'll go through different construction phases that's visually represented on the map. It'll take more resources, more time, etc. So they want it to be incremental, more realistic in the future. And then in terms of, well, how do you unlock these developments? They say that as your region grows, these new developments become available to you. They also said that there's some interplay when it comes to your overall realm. So they didn't mention this, but I would imagine how this works is, let's say your overall realm, for instance, has a foreign war. It now has a lot more money in its piggy bank. Maybe it has reached some level of technological development or whatever, and you want to build a university at a realm.
Oh yeah, research is going to play a huge part in wealth, and research are going to play a huge part in what you can build. You're probably going to start off with your basic farmland, lumberyard, maybe a mine and a quarry, maybe one castle and a port probably. That's kind of like your basic building blocks for medieval. Maybe not a castle, but the other stuff, yes. And then as you increase in food, population, wealth, your income, all that, and you research some of the things, like a university is going to be a research item. 100%. It's going to be a research item. Then you're going to be able to build that and place it where you want. But you're not going to have everything right off the bat. Stuff's going to be locked behind wealth. Stuff's going to be locked behind population. Income, maybe. Not sure about income. That's a little iffy depending on how they do income in this one. But definitely research is going to be a factor for some of it.
Level, you might have the ability to choose which of your regions then gets this development that's unique to the realm, that then gets split out into the region, and you can build it. So it seems like these are going to be both a mix of region-specific mechanics, but then also realm interactions. And already you're seeing we're starting to put some layers in the Total War campaign.
If you research something for your entire realm, you need to be able to use it in every province. So say a university, if you research a university for your entire realm, you need to be able to build one in every single province. But say if you research a shipyard, and I'm just using this as an example, you research a shipyard, that doesn't need to be in every single province. So that could kind of be more specific wise. So there's certain things that I don't think should be kind of hindered by provinces, where if it's a realm research, then there's other things that I think should be specific to a province research. Kind of have that different layers. So like if you get Burgos up so much, you can research a shipyard and it's just for that province. Whereas again, the university would be realm research. So you research it and you could put it in every single province. That's how it needs to be. Or some like variation of that.
Campaign, something we've never really had before. It's always been very shallow. I'm very excited for this. So yeah, hand place your stuff, hand place your castles. This to me is very interesting to see how they talk about battle maps and things like that. If you can hand place things, does that mean the battle maps are customized to where you place that castle? If I place a castle by a river, does that actually mean that when I fight that battle, there is a river that has a huge implication whether or not it matters?
Probably.
That's really cool.
Have you ever tried a lollipop that's been in a toilet before? How about 3?
But they didn't touch on that. Other things they said,
Of course, they didn't touch on battles yet.
For instance, might matter. So it can impact your trade routes, who you trade with, things like that. And they're still trying to figure out the balance of how do you make regions feel unique and different if the player has this much ability to dictate what's going on. How do you make the style still unique? So they're still trying to work that one out. Next.
The other thing I just thought of was I brought up the point about placing castles around. So, and like the approximate 30 for each province. And I'm saying approximate 30 for each province because that's the number that we have, but we don't know. Now, if you take a territory and you no longer need the castles there, can you delete the castles and make more farmland? That's actually another good question.
Next, we get into actual construction. So, like we said, no more building slots. But when it comes to these specific developments as they pop up. Obviously, you can see here they're modeling levels. So one thing we talked about is that the level might be something that develops organically with growth of population or wealth. It might eventually like level up. Maybe there's requirements for pop or wealth to get to the next level. The other thing that
I
they
like
said
that.
is that they did kind of like this old system of building chains when it gave player agency for customizing the region, but they're changing this into what they're calling perks for now. It's placeholder, but it's kind of like a perk. And essentially what that is they showed an example where they pulled up a lumber camp. You can see that it has these different slots. And the slots would be something like, oh, for your lumber camp, do you want to add a hunting lodge next to it, which would give you food production? Do you want a glacier, which might add urban wealth? Or do you want a charcoal burner, which adds rural wealth?
Are we going to be able to
And
add
this would
them
take
all?
away from regional development. So that's cool. The fact that you can add these little perks that, you know, are tacked on to your developments that give them different boons and things like that. But the other cool thing is, again, they're sticking to this idea of player agency. Just because you chose one does not come at the exclusion of the others. You could have a lumber camp that has all three of these.
Good.
They talked about the fantasy of having a big urban metropolis, Constantinople, that could have everything. All the check marks, all the perks, all applied to it. So they are leaning to the idea that you can have these super cities if that's the way you want to go.
Good.
Then there were some questions posed. They're going to mull on these and get back to us later, but it was looking at, you know, what limitations you expect in this. If you're moving to freedom, what limitations are there going to be in this kind of more free-flowing model? How is policy and technology going to interplay on this? These were questions posed by chat. Didn't really get answers, but they'll take this, mull it over, perhaps give us a blog post in the future.
We're not going to get many answers to the questions today, or, well, for this live stream, because this live stream really wasn't about answering questions. This live stream that they did was more about giving kind of the foundation for Medieval 3 and seeing what questions people ask so they have a general idea of which way to go.
Future. And then we get into the
This
final
is what
section,
I'm
which is
interested
gonna be
in.
population and wealth. Again, this is very exciting. More layers to Total War. So population, you could see this in the corner of the UI.
No, what's
placeholder
townfolk,
UI
peasants,
again.
food,
But they're
region,
saying that
wealth,
they want it
income.
to be deep and interconnected. They gave some examples. They want population to feel real and play real. So for instance, when you muster your troops, the peasants are going to be coming from the fields. If there's migration between regions, it's not just a percentage buff, but it's actually people flowing and the population numbers changing. So for instance, here, if you see 200,000 peasants, migration comes in, you might get more, 10,000 more per turn or something like that. So it's an actual count that you can then do something with those populations. Same thing goes within a region from cities to farms. The other thing you'll notice is that there are different classes of your population. They said for now they're working with 3 estates. So it's your nobles, your townsfolk, and your peasants. But these estates may change. This is the starting point. Same thing goes with numbers. You can see that these are represented very much, you know, your standard pyramid here. Very few nobles, fewer townfolk, many more peasants. So again, numbers aren't final, but it's indicative of where they're looking. And they had a little bit of chat about, well, what does this mean? Obviously, when you go to raise your army, your knights, you know, if you were to fully mobilize, you only get 300 knights. Versus if you tap into your peasantry, you can, in theory, have, you know, 200,000 peasants called to arms.
So is it going to be where we can raise 300 knights, raise, let's say the townsfolk would be like man at arms, raise 18,000 of those and raise 200,000 peasants and have, what would that be? 218,000 odd soldiers going to fight? Or is it kind of like one or you choose one? So can you only raise the peasants, the townsfolk, the nobles? Man, I hope CA watches this. Because I got some questions. I got to remember, I got to tune into the next live stream.
Of the levy. Now, obviously, that's
and this might be stuff
whatever.
This actually might be stuff they go over once they start going over the battles.
This is just showing that once they add these mechanics into the game, now Total War actually has nuance, actually has systems that can start to interact with each other. So I love this foundation that you see when Paradox does it. They can unlock a lot more realism. So Total War is hoping to get more in that vein.
There we go.
The other thing they said is that when you look at a particular representation of a person, a pop, that person has stats about them in the sense that they would have what estate do they belong to, what religion do they follow, and what culture are they kind of coming from. They didn't say really what that means, but just having those as metadata tags means that they can interact with different systems. So that's really interesting. Then there was stuff about questions asked. How do you
I'm assuming about the culture, you're probably talking like Christianity, Catholic, Muslim, or I'm sorry, it's Islamic at the time. And then you could probably go a little bit broader and be like the culture between like England, France, Spain, stuff like that.
these estates interact with one another? They say they're still working on this. But obviously, they said, food production comes from rural populations. Nobles might influence how you auto grow your cities, and they might even manage particular regions for you. So, more nobles might mean that cities all of a sudden start building up, or they level up quicker, or maybe you get more vineyards dynamically, things like that. So, I really like this. The fact that some of the development of your map is kind of outside of your control. You get a lot more freedom, but then there's a lot more going on dynamically.
What I haven't seen is how do you get peasants to be townsfolk and townsfolk to be nobles? Or is it just kind of they pop in, like if Burgos, the example they used, if that kind of grows to a certain limit, do nobles just move in there? So I'm kind of curious on how that population works.
So it's the best of both worlds in my mind. Then they went on to wealth and taxation. And they said in the same manner that they're trying to simulate population, they do want to simulate wealth. So if there's like 200,000 people in one province, there might be 200,000 pieces of gold or pieces of wealth. And that can flow and move between regions. And you can see it down here. And then they started to talk about the nuances of what region wealth means. So they said basically that region wealth is going to be sort of your piggy bank. It's the overall wealth, the money that's flowing around in a particular region. It gets further broken down by a state.
What
And
about
you can tap
wealth
into the
for your
region's
realm?
wealth with things like taxes. So you can see that here, income. Presumably that means you're taxing the overall region wealth and you're extracting from it about 500 income in this case. But they said, what
Okay.
happens with the rest of that wealth? Well, they said that the rest of the wealth is dynamically going to be used up. Your vassals might use it, or it might be going into natural development of your population. So presumably what that means is if you, fully tax a region where you take the 10,000 in here, presumably what that means is that now the region no longer has free cash to do things, and that'll stymie growth. They didn't mention that, but that's how this could play out when you start to get
Makes
these more
sense.
realistic simulations and interactions. And then they said that they're trying to make taxation and interactions with wealth more dynamic. It's no longer just a slider. They said they had a senior designer who did research on historical medieval tax systems, and they said that they're starting to now incorporate different ways of getting at your wealth. So they still have traditional tax system, which they called systemic wealth, which is based on your, what is percentage of wealth that you're going to tax. But then there's also other systems, other ways to generate wealth. So rent and tribute systems, they gave as an example, how your region is laid out. If you have a lot of fields and a lot of towns, for instance, you might be able to get more rent from the people using those facilities. If you have more castles, for instance, you may be able to better extract tribute from the region.
I was never meant to be a warrior.
So, my boy, let's see what
I'm starting these games soon.
And then next they got into some interesting stuff, just talking in theory, not really showing, but talking about the interactions of armies and wealth. And this got me really excited because I'm thinking about history and it really does seem realistic. So for instance, they said when you raise an army and that army goes out into the field, wealth has to be used to pay for the supply chain of the army. This is the first time we've really
Makes
had dynamic
sense.
supply chains. And take a look at this. They say if that army is defeated by an enemy, they can seize the wealth in the army camp. So someone alluded offhand, that's more reason to build a castle to secure the supply line. So this has huge implications for me that like the strategic way you maneuver your armies, the way you can raid them, interact.
Can you build castles in enemy territory to secure your supply line? That would be completely insane. if you can invade an enemy territory, build a castle, and just, keep kind of building castles on your way to their region capital. Or can you attack a castle, take it over, and make it yours?
Interact with them, ambush them, that could get really in-depth and detailed and realistic in the future. So I really like this discussion. They say if an army imp disbands, the wealth then returns to the general pool of that region. So lots of really cool stuff there that's hinted at but not quite shown. There's a question asked from the community, what systems from past Total Wars do you enjoy? They're saying that there's lots of inspiration, not just from Total War, but other games. Obviously Paradox here.
Paradox,
yeah. By name, but you can just see it. And then that was kind of it. They fielded some more questions, didn't really give that many answers, said that they'll get back to us in blogs and future updates. But yeah, that's basically it. So this is honestly above and beyond what I was hoping for Medieval 3. The developers were talking how excited they were to finally do Medieval 3 justice. The fact that they now have War Court and can do all these complex ways to do the campaign map. Man, this is honestly blowing away everything I thought Total War would be. It is the injection of fresh content that the series have long needed, that we all were foreboding, thinking that Total War was going down to the dumps and Historical was going down to the dumps.
Oh, absolutely.
What they're trying to pull off here and what they're actually showing us is honestly incredible. And the best thing about this is that they're being open, transparent about it, showing it, and very much soliciting feedback from the community. So definitely, if you have questions or if you have ways that you think systems should play out, go to their forums, go to their live streams, interact with CA. It seems like they're all ears. We can potentially steer the ship of Total War's future. Anyways, that's it for my recap. I hope you guys enjoyed, and
Historical Total War was absolutely 100% going down. It was the same stuff every year. Like, take construction, for example. It was the building chains, having a certain number of slots. Armies were the same. You would train troops, you'd move them with a general, or move them on their own. And you'd go and you fight, and you didn't have to worry about your wealth or your supplies or anything like that, because you had a certain amount of supplies you would always take with you, and it would always be secured. It's definitely a different way to play Total War. I'm actually very excited to see how this plays out. I will be giving this a try absolutely when it comes out. It seems amazing so far. The map seems a great size for this new type of Total War game they're making here. It's not too big to where it's overwhelming, but then again, it's big enough to do grand scale type activities on. So far, everything I've seen is Medieval 3 is shaping up to completely change up Total War. Not make it a Paradox game where it's difficult right off the bat, but kind of lead you in a new direction and let it start off kind of easy and then get progressively more difficult as the campaign goes on. I'm super excited for this. Let me know what you guys think about Medieval 3 so far in the comments down below with everything we've just went over.